G'day and welcome to Redriven and welcome to the large SUVs installment of this series. Now, before we get into this episode, there are a few ground rules that we set up in part one of this series, basically explaining what these cars or SUVs have to achieve to even be included in this list. If you haven't seen part one, check it out up here or down there. Oh, also, it's worth watching part one because we've thrown in a few handy hints when it comes to buying cars and SUVs at this budget. Now, when it comes to larger SUVs, there are a whole bunch of like soft roaders to choose from. But with this list, we've decided to inject some legitimate off-road ability. Like, we're not saying all of the SUVs listed are, off-roading weapons by any means, but they can handle themselves on the rough stuff while still providing everything that you'd expect from an SUV at this budget. So, kicking things off, it's the Suzuki Grand Vitara. Now look, some may argue that the Grand Vitara, being only very slightly larger than the likes of the similar generations RAV4 and CR-V, simply isn't big enough to be regarded as a larger SUV. But the Suzuki sneaks into this category thanks to what's hiding beneath its skin. See, while the RAV4 and the CR-V and the vast majority of other SUVs in the Grand Vitara's category are built upon a monocoque platform, like a passenger car, the Suzuki is underpinned by a full ladder frame chassis, just like larger and proper off-roaders such as the Toyota Land Cruiser and Mercedes G-Wagon. And this results in the Suzuki arguably offering a more tough and rugged platform than its direct competitors. And to cement its off-roading prowess, it even boasts a dual-range gearbox. Of course, thanks to that ladder frame chassis, on-road the Grand Vitara won't handle or steer with quite the same refinement as its more car-based counterparts, but still, it's not too bad. Now, the specific Grand Vitara that we're referring to for this under $5,000 budget is the second generation 1998 to 2005 model. And while the three-door is pretty bloody cool, we are talking larger SUVs here, so the obvious pick is the 5-door, and we'd be steering you towards the 2.5 litre V6 over the 2 litre 4. Look, either engine is generally reliable, but the extra power from the 6-cylinder won't go astray. Although we'd reject any Grand Vitaras with whining diffs, noisy gearboxes, a chattering set of valves, or a loud camshaft, unless you're in the position to look after the repairs. Regardless of this, just make sure that it has a full service history. And look, yes, finding a Grand Vitara in good condition at this budget is going to be quite the challenge. But, as with most proper 4x4s, it is absolutely critical to check for damage caused by off-roading. Actually, before you even think about buying any of the SUVs on this list, make sure you go and check out our ultimate 4x4 buyer's guide video, as it could save you thousands. The link is just up here and also down there. But moving into fourth position, it's the Kia Sorento. Over the last decade or so, the Sorento has come to be regarded as one of the market's leading large SUVs, and in current form, it shares its platform with the human-swallowing Kia Carnival and Hyundai Staria. But thanks to this, it completely lacks any real off-roading chops. But rewind 20 years to the very first generation Sorento, and this Sorento couldn't be further from its more recent siblings. We're talking a rugged body-on-frame platform with a live rear axle and part-time four-wheel drive with low-range reduction gearing that's electronically switchable from the dash. But be warned, anyone buying a first-gen Sorento thinking they might be getting a suburban-friendly SUV might be upset when they find that they're stuck with a relatively hardcore bush basher lacking the on-road manners of the Sorrento's soft-roading counterparts. Actually, we'll go as far as saying that the first-gen Sorento might just be one of the most underrated off-roaders out there. But if you're happy to put up with some truck-like dynamics, and with seeing how many 4x4 dual cab utes are being purchased as family cars, we're guessing many of you are, the Sorento, at least for its time, came loaded with equipment: air conditioning, cruise control, loads of cup holders, a huge boot, roof rails, alloy wheels, airbags and ABS all came as standard. However, we'd be avoiding the diesel models, and with most petrol examples at this price point showing well over 200,000 kilometres, make sure it has a full service history, and it is absolutely critical to have a full pre-purchase inspection carried out, because if these V6 engines skip any scheduled maintenance, they can get very, very nasty. Actually, while we're talking about pre-purchase things that you absolutely must do, we highly recommend also checking out our ultimate used car buyer's guide. Again, the link is up here and down there. Like the 4x4 buyer's guide, watching these videos, it could save you thousands. Now, next up, it's possibly my new favourite Bond car, driven by 007 himself. It's the Toyota Prado. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen No Time to Die yet, halfway through the film, Bond finds himself outnumbered and seemingly outmatched by a fleet of thugs in Defenders and Range Rover Sports, yet comes out victorious in the Japanese Underdog. Now look, we're not suggesting that you replicate these Bond-like antics, and yes, obviously there is a certain level of dramatic license taken in the movie, but picking a J90 Land Cruiser Prado for this role was an inspired choice, and one we'd highly recommend for you. Even though the majority of J90s at this price will be pushing or even exceeding 300,000 kilometres, and they're going to be in very used condition, these things, at least in petrol form, are an absolute workhorse and make for not only a great SUV, but a serious adventure vehicle. Now look, the diesel-engined J90s, they do have their fans and there are decent examples out there, but they have been susceptible to quite a few issues over the years, hence why at this budget, we'd be going for an arguably easier to maintain 4 or 6 cylinder petrol engine model instead. But just know, in either cylinder count, like James Bond, they do love a drink. Now look, we know what you're thinking. Finding a J90 for this price is near impossible, let alone finding a good one. And look, we do agree to a point, but in saying that, here's the hot tip. To find one, head to any regional centres or to smaller auction houses or vehicle wholesalers because they are out there. Also, it is critical that you have a pre-purchase inspection carried out because the majority of J90s at this budget will have had quite the life, and there are a few things to watch out for, and there are a few sketchy examples on the used market that are best avoided. But with some hunting, again, especially in regional areas, there are decent J90s out there for this budget. Which brings us to our next pick, the Mitsubishi Pajero, or depending on where you're watching this from, it might be the Shogun or the Montero. Now, unlike the previous 3 SUVs, the third generation 1999 to 2006 Pajero, it features a unibody or monocoque construction, but it integrates its ladder frame chassis for extra torsional rigidity, and this improves the actual cabin strength, therefore arguably making it a far nicer thing to drive on road than its more truck-like counterparts, while still being incredibly capable off-road. In fact, this setup has been so effective, Mitsubishi have retained the base platform, and actually most of the entire vehicle short of a few facelifts and upgrades, for over 20 years. Plus, thanks to Mitsubishi's excellent Super Select 4 four-wheel drive system, unlike the vast majority of its competition, the Pajero can be driven in all-wheel drive mode on tarmac all of the time, meaning that it should be inherently safer for all of those on board. At this budget, Pajeros, just like the Prados mentioned earlier, will be pushing and exceeding 300,000 kilometres. But many of these examples will have racked up such huge kilometres thanks to long freeway and touring trips, and therefore will have hopefully been well maintained and cared for so they can actually complete these journeys. Again, like the Prado, we'd be avoiding the diesel models at this price point because the repairs to the oil burners, they can become expensive. Although in saying that, there are plenty of diesel owners out there that swear by the Pajeros, but still, we'd be very cautious. Again, just make sure you do your homework, watch our ultimate 4x4 buyer's guide, and honestly, be prepared to hunt and haggle a whole lot to get a good Pajero at this price point. But again, they are out there. Now, before we get to the top spot, look, the only way that we can keep making these videos is with your support. That's how the algorithm works. And the best way to support us is simply by hitting the like, subscribe, and bell buttons down there and sharing our content as much as you can. Honestly, doing that would help us out so much. Also, for next week's video, we need your help. We're going to be wrapping up this top 5 first cars under $5,000 list with the most fun cars for under $5,000. We're not talking the fastest or the most capable, just the cars under $5,000 that will make you laugh as much as you possibly can when driving. So what cars do you think should make up the list? Let us know in the comments. Okay, taking this list out, it's the Nissan X-Trail. Now, for this budget, we'd be going for the first generation T30 X-Trail from 2000 to 2007. Yes, there are second generation T31s available at this price point, but they're going to have loads of kilometres on them and they're going to be in pretty average condition. Hence why we would go for a lower kilometre, better condition T30 instead. And try this for us. Next time you're out and about, take note of how many T30 X-Trails are still populating our roads. They are bloody everywhere. Actually, both Jim, that owns this workshop, and myself are guilty of perpetuating this spectacle of X-Trails on Aussie roads because both he and I have owned this model X-Trail a few times and they're bloody awesome. Now, we're not saying for a moment that the T30 X-Trail has anywhere near the off-roading abilities of our previous place getters on this list, but, and I know this from experience, with a set of all-terrains fitted, what this SUV is capable of off-road is super impressive, especially considering that on-road, it might just be the most refined and car-like of any of the vehicles previously mentioned. It still feels tough and rugged, but nothing like a truck, like basically everything else on this list. Plus, the X-Trail's interior is near perfect SUV for us. It's spacious and clad in tough and hard-wearing plastic, so you can throw everything from a mountain bike to your kids in the back, and the interior at least should come out damage-free. But the X-Trail, it isn't perfect. Early examples had problems with timing chain tensioners, and some models can have electronic gremlins like cam position sensor issues, and on occasion, some have even reported fuel leaks. But the worst issue of all is their propensity to blow head gaskets. But the thing is, hopefully any models that are still running really well these days should have had those issues resolved by now. Also, some markets did receive 2-litre petrol-powered front-wheel drive only and diesel models, but we'd be avoiding these and sticking to the 2.5-litre four-wheel drive examples. But again, with any of the vehicles on this list, or really any used SUV, make sure you watch our used car buyer's guide and ultimate 4x4 buyer's guide before you commit to buying what you're looking at. Again, guys, honestly, it could save you a fortune. Any of the SUVs on this lists, dickhead, a live rear axle, live rear. Actually, while we're talking about pre-purchase things, me, come on. Spoiler alert, but the worst issue of all is their propensity to blow head to regional centres or to smaller auction houses or list. But, and I know, the pump just went off. Which brings us to our next pick, the Mitsubishi, like the hands on the hips thing. Now, if you enjoy this video and you're enjoying our content in general, can you please hit those like, subscribe, and bell buttons and share our content as much as you can? And also, what cars should make up next week's list? It's under $5,000, most fun cars. Let us know in the comments. See you next time.